Welcome to a bonus episode of the Marx Brothers Council Podcast. Hi everyone, this is Bob Gassell. Matthew and Noah they're probably asleep right now because I didn't tell them I was going to be recording this. As most of you know, recently we put out episode number 83, Horse Feathers Reeducated, which was a look back at horse feathers featuring comments from you, the audience. Unfortunately, we had just way too many submissions that we couldn't get to all of them in the show and keep it at a reasonable length. So what we're going to do today is play all the contributions that we got, totally uncut. Even the ones you heard in the original show, most of them were cut down. So why don't we get started? Our first clip comes from Scott Rner.
I love horse feathers. It's in a fairly constant battle with Animal Crackers as my favorite Marx Brothers film. Animal Crackers usually taking a narrow lead, only because there's nothing for Groucho and horse feathers I find quite as brilliant as this strange interlude. Though the horse feathers canoe scene does come very close. And nothing for Harpo quite as great as the Rittenhouse Bridge game. Animal Crackers also has my favorite Chico solo, and of course Zeppo omits the body of the letter and says hunga dunga, hunga, hunga dunga, but it's damn close. Horse Feathers is just so wonderful. I think it's also the one Marx Brothers film I've never seen not in the top 4 on anyone's list. Someone will surely prove me wrong on this, but I think it's a better contender for that claim than even Duck Soup, A Night at the Opera, or Animal Crackers, which I'd say are its closest competitors. Though each one of those 3 films more frequently shows up in the top spot on such lists, all 3 have at least a few people who don't hold it in quite as high esteem. It seems to me that Horse Feathers really is the Sara Lee of Marx Brothers films. Nobody doesn't like it. Ironically, though it's at number 2 or even number 1 on my list, it's the only one of their Paramount films that I don't consider my favorite Paramount film of its respective year. But that's only because it was from 1932, which I really do consider Paramount's Paramount year. Besides my all-time favorite movie, Lubitsch's Trouble in Paradise, that studio's releases of 1932 included Love Me Tonight, Island of Lost Souls, Shanghai Express, $1 Million Legs, 1 Hour with You, The Sign of the Cross, Guilty as Hell, The Big Broadcast, Blonde Venus, If I Had a Million, A Farewell to Arms, the list just goes on and on and on and on. And despite the ostentatiously Paramountian European mythical kingdom setting of Duck Soup, Paramount being the most stylistically European of the major American studios, I think Horse Feathers is also the one of their films most clearly a Paramount product, not only in its visual style and production design, but also its structure. Using different variations on Everyone Says I Love You as a linking musical motif for the brothers is just the type of thing we would see in a pre-code film directed by Lubitsch, or Mamoulian, or even Frank Tuttle, all of whom were working at Paramount that year. And like Animal Crackers, it features the great Robert Gregg, whom I consider probably the key symbolic figure of Paramount's golden age. I spoke in the Monkey Business segment of the Forrest Gumpian luck of Ruth Hall, but in just 4 months of 1932, Gregg appeared in Jewel Robbery, Love Me Tonight, Horse Feathers, and Trouble in Paradise, 3 of them from Paramount, and all 4 among the most entertaining films ever made, in my opinion. Now, I'd probably be suspected of having been replaced by a pod if I didn't mention anything about the Gilbert and Sullivan influence on this film, and I will, though it's admittedly more limited here. It's strong in Groucho's opening musical numbers, of course, and we see it again in the brown-nosing faculty members with no faculties of their own. The professor is right. But elsewhere, it's limited to the unquestioning reaction to Groucho's distinctly undignified behavior. But the satire is still there, and though the setting here is academia, the idea is the same. If everybody believes it, it must be true. And if someone wears a beard, they must be wise. As for those actors playing the professors following Groucho's lead in He Always Gets His Man, I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them had appeared on Broadway the year before in Of the I Sing, doing pretty much the same thing playing the Supreme Court. I would give anything to have witnessed their rehearsal for this film, and to listen at the commissary on lunch break as they discussed what they thought about what they were doing. When I hear descriptions of the deleted scenes, I do feel it's too bad we can't see them, but the silver lining of Marx Brothers comedies having no essential material is that their absence really doesn't feel that painful, at least to me. I definitely wish that the Connie Bailey divan scene wasn't so chopped up, but the absence of the full missing scenes bothers me very little. There's still plenty to enjoy, and I have no need for my Marx Brothers films to be any longer. The last gag is kind of a stinker, though. Whereas I can accept Monkey Business's needle in a haystack gag as a fittingly anticlimactic moment, almost sticking it to a convention, shall we say, this just feels to me like a weak, unrelated moment. The last shot of this film should have had something to do with college, or football, or swordfish, or one final check under the calendar girl's calendar. God, that sounds dirty, which is probably as it should be.
Okay, here is another menu from Emily Malik.
Horse Feathers is my quintessential Thanksgiving meal. Turkey with lots of gravy, homemade mashed potatoes, peas, tons of stuffing, and pumpkin cheesecake bars. This is my favorite Marx Brothers movie. Because of how short it is, I will keep my thoughts short as well. I love everything about it. The music, the songs, the one-liners, the gags, everything. This was a film that truly made me a Marx Brothers fan. A couple of years after I first saw Animal Crackers as a kid, I noticed my dad watching Horse Feathers during what I later learned was a swordfish scene. Soon I watched the whole movie and enjoyed it immensely. It appealed to me when I was a kid because it felt like a series of episodes just like my favorite cartoons. It had the same energy as those shows, and today that still holds up. The final thing that I want to mention is Horse Feathers is a Thanksgiving movie. I've said this on the Marx Brothers Council Facebook page in the past, but I will reiterate my argument here. It's a Thanksgiving movie for two reasons. The first is that it contains various aspects of Thanksgiving, including football, drinking, since that holiday unfortunately sees the most binge drinking in the United States, family arguments, and being thankful. Huxley College should be grateful for Wagstaff's presence because if they're not, he will always get his man. And second, and most importantly, early in the movie, Jennings mentions that he is Mullen and McCarty set to play in the Thanksgiving game, which is the climax. I will continue to adore Horse Feathers for the rest of my life. I will always make time to watch it, especially at Thanksgiving.
Now here's the full contribution from Scott Sadernay, who opened the original show with a voiceover. Here's his full comment.
In a world where Marx Brothers fans gather around a podcast, they discuss Horse Feathers. And I really don't have anything to comment except that I showed it recently to a friend of mine who's a movie buff. He had never seen it before and he enjoyed it immensely. Carry on.
Hello, folks. This is Andrew Gilmore, longtime Marx Brothers Council member, and I want to share something kind of personal with you because Horse Feathers is a movie that absolutely changed my life, and I'll try to tell you why. My father had told me about the Marx Brothers, but I never saw them until I was about 9 years old, and my father brought home this VHS tape from the library of this movie called Horse Feathers, which I knew nothing about. And I watched it, and there were these crazy guys that I was just immediately drawn to. I didn't know anything about them, but something about them just tickled me right away. And there were two things specifically. One is that I'm from Pennsylvania, so I went to a Quaker school growing up, and it was just a very strict, conservative kind of place. I don't think anybody there had a sense of humor, so I had this kind of unpleasant upbringing. And then when I saw Horse Feathers and I saw these guys, I didn't know anything about college, but I understood, as a child, I understood school and classrooms and teachers. So here were these guys breaking all the rules and talking back to the teachers and just defying everything that I was being taught to follow. And that kind of sparked something in me. I thought, are you allowed to do that? And it just showed me that there was another way of looking at life other than this very, as I say, kind of strict way that I was taught to look at the world. And just something about the Marx Brothers just made me, it was very liberating for me. And they just made me look outside the box and look at the world a different way. And they showed me that it's okay to question authority. It's okay to not necessarily follow the same path as everybody else. So I'm sure a lot of people got that from the Marx Brothers, and that's very important. And I think the fact that my view of the world for the last 30 years has been a little bit askew, I think you can trace that back to Horse Feathers. So that's certainly one thing that it did for me that changed my life. And the other thing was that it really gave me my sense of humor, because I remember as a child, I had a sense of humor. I would laugh when other people were funny, but I didn't understand how you create a joke. How do you say something that gets a laugh from other people? I just didn't understand the mechanics of creating humor. And then something about Horse Feathers and the Marx Brothers' particular style of humor just turned the light switch on for me. And I went, oh, okay, I see. You take the meaning of a word and switch it around to mean something else. I can do that. I see how that works. So that was kind of a revelation for me, that I began to understand humor and the construction of humor, and everything that I've done in my life as a comedian, working in theater and radio, and as a comedy writer, and all of that, that really all comes from the Marx Brothers. They initiated all of that. And so those are two very important things. And just as a side note to that last point, particularly I remember reading books about comedy when I was a child, and coming across the word pun and not really understanding what that was. And I asked my mother, what's a pun? And she told me, and I didn't really get it. But then I remember watching Horse Feathers for the first time and hearing,
You sing a high, huh?
Yes, I have a falsetto voice.
That's a funny. My last pupil, she got a false set of teeth.
and I heard that line, and again, that's when the light bulb went on over my head, and I went, oh, that's a pun. Now I get it. And as those of you in the council know, I've been a terrible, hopeless punster all my life, so I apologize for that. But as it turns out, you can all blame Chico for that. So just briefly, and it looks like I managed to get this in under 5 minutes, but those are the ways in which Horse Feathers changed my life. And actually, when I graduated high school in 2005, I paraphrased some of Groucho's opening speech for my own graduation speech, and I would include a clip of that here, but I don't think there's enough time. So that's all I can tell you for now, and if I ever get a check for $15.22, I'll send it to you.
Hello, Marx Council podcasters. My name is Pablo Manthano. I'm a long-time listener from Spain, of all places, who first saw A Night at the Opera around 1988 in an old Betamax videotape that my brother used to play time and time again in those years. Since then, my Marxian fandom has only increased more and more with time. Horse Feathers is one of the films that became late favorites for me. Some of its humor didn't reach me as a kid as much as that of the other films. I preferred Monkey Business because it was more dynamic like a cartoon, or Duck Soup for sheer lunacy. Anyway, I love Horse Feathers now, and I've studied it quite a bit. There are some mysteries about it. Like Matthew, I've compared the shooting script and the continuity script that lives in the New York State Library in Albany, and found that this last document is so different to the currently available cut of the movie that I assumed it had been made from a work print during the editing stage. Although I learned from Joe Adamson that continuity scripts were usually made from released prints that came back to the studio after running for some time to control their integrity, this isn't a normal continuity script. It's a censorship dialogue script, although it describes the movie shot by shot, and it comes with a date, July 26, 1932. The shooting script is dated March 7, 1932, and the movie was released on August 19, 1932. So between March and August, the movie was shot, edited, submitted to censorship in each state, no Hays Code in full gear yet, and finally released. But the July 1932 cut of the movie doesn't seem to have been the one that was finally released. For instance, in one of the contemporary reviews, a dialogue between Chico and Groucho about the price of the ice is mentioned. That exchange is in the shooting script, but not in the censorship script. One of the most interesting differences between the censorship script and the movie that we have now is the speakeasy scene with Groucho, Chico, and Harpo. In the censorship script, there are some additional gags, both verbal and visual, and the ones that are in the film as we have it come in a different order. All the Harpo bits are at the end of the scene after Groucho and Chico have run away from the bartender. It ends with the slot machine routine. Also, at the beginning of the scene, clearly there was a different shot of Chico used during the first swordfish dialogue with his boss, because it includes a camera pan that's not in the movie. Another fascinating difference is between both the shooting and the censorship scripts and the depiction we find in Alan Niles' book of the missing parts of Connie's boudoir scene. Apparently, at the end of the sequence, Groucho jumped through the window because Harpo offered to catch him with his net. But just when Groucho is jumping, a dog bark distracts Harpo and runs away to capture him, making Groucho fall on the ground. It's a bit of humiliating physical humor that doesn't sound like Paramount Groucho, more like A Night at the Opera where he was thrown down the stairs. In the censorship script, an altogether different thing happens. Groucho knocks out Jennings off camera. It happens as well in the shooting script. It's also rather strange and not particularly funny. With this evidence, I guessed that the jump through the window described in Niles' book was simply false. But Joe Adamson mentioned that in the Academy Library there's a continuity script where the scene ends with that jump. And lastly, in the censorship script, there's no wedding scene at the end. There's no burning college scene either. It simply ends with the football game. Since we know the burning college ending was shot, I suppose it simply didn't work when they put the movie together. Maybe people didn't laugh at the previews. By July 26th, it wasn't in the movie anymore. It seems likely that it's at this point that the wedding sequence was shot, probably because the football game didn't have enough punch as an ending. The shooting of that beat must have been made very quickly, and for very little money, the camera setup and Seppo's absence betray the rush, not to mention how vague the whole concept is. Maybe when they did that additional scene, they also reshot the ending of Connie's apartment scene with Groucho jumping out the window. This whole reshoot thing seems to me a matter for further research if there ever was one. And not wishing to overstay my welcome, just a couple of minor details before I leave. The story of the movie, which was more conventional as originally written in the shooting script, seems to have been modified during principal photography, where Seppo's love triangle with Thelma, Todd and Peggy was scrapped, thus giving him less to do without that dramatic tension. And leaving the Marxes aside for a moment, I would like to mention a small visual peculiarity. It's the frequent use of things in the foreground that frame the main action, like the cash register or some bottles in the speakeasy, the cars in the street when Harpo traps the policeman, and the students' backheads during Groucho's first musical number. I don't think this technique was used in the other film MacLeod did with the Marxes, Monkey Business, and I don't think it's used that much in later films. It might be something director of photography Ray June did more than his peers. Okay, I'll go now, but just one last important thing. Please. That's not Seppo singing. No way, that's not his voice. When he sings Sweet Adeline in Monkey Business, it sounds totally different. And tellingly, his singing in Horse Feathers and Duck Soup is never live. You can always tell it's been looped. Maybe his short-lived radio career as a singer was fraudulent as well? Thanks so much for listening.
Hello, this is Chris Johnson, and I want to talk about Horse Feathers, and specifically the enigma that's Thelma Todd. I grew up, watching Laurel and Hardy first before the Marx Brothers, just by a few years. And I happened to notice her in shorts like Another Fine Mess and Accustomed as We Are and Chickens Come Home. And she had this unbelievable screen presence where you can just see her expressive eyes, her charm, beauty, just an overall vivaciousness that, as a little kid, I could not help but notice. So, I mean, she just for that time frame of film, I just feel like she jumped, out of the screen and into my heart. I just I fell in love with her, from the minute I saw her in these films. So by the time I get around to seeing Monkey Business and Horse Feathers, I'm like, there's that woman again from Laurel and Hardy movies. And this is back in the days when all of her shorts with Zazu Pitts and Patsy Kelly were not available. It's a miracle that all those films are available on DVD nowadays. But back then, you were hard pressed to see any of them, let alone on TV or on VHS or what have you. So in any case, I just feel like her presence in these movies, and specifically Horse Feathers, just raises them to heights that the other movies don't have. I mean, I just feel like she is that much of a force. So in 1932, Thelma Todd and Zazu Pitts made some of the most, advanced, sexy, you could almost say raunchy movies for its time, especially the ones George Marshall directed, like Adam and Eve and Strictly Unreliable. There's some scenes in there you just wonder how they get away with that in 1932. Obviously, it was pre-code back then, but that year, you also had Thelma in Call Her Savage, where she had that famous catfight scene with Clara Bow, and she was also in Klondike, which is a good movie as well. But in 1 week in particular, between August 13 and 20, this is an amazing week because not only do you have Horse Feathers coming out, I believe on August 13, you also had Speak Easily on August 19 that Thelma made with Buster Keaton, where there's that scene where Thelma and Buster are acting drunk together, and it's a famous scene, and it's an amazing tour de force of slapstick, and it's just fantastic. And then the day after, on August 20, you had Thelma and Zazu in Show Business, which is a precursor to the Three Stooges Paying the Pullman. That was a remake of that movie. So anyway, that week, I mean, you just had, these amazing movies, and I feel like Thelma never had a better time in her career as a comedian. And anyway, just a fantastic period of movie comedy. And so last thing I wanted to say is that Dave Stevenson, who runs the Looser Than Loose tent in Lawrence, Massachusetts, tent of the Sons of the Desert, he's having a Thelma Todd convention at the end of July that is going to coincide with the time of her birth. He does this irregularly. I went to the last one about 4 or 5 years ago, but they're doing another one, so it's exciting, and it's going to be in Lawrence, Massachusetts at the end of July. So Dave Stevenson is the man to contact about that. They have an amazing array of stills, photographs from her whole career, and they obviously show a lot of her movies. So if you love Thelma like I do, I recommend it, and hopefully that convention goes and is a big success. So that's it for me. I talked too long about Thelma, but I love Thelma Todd like a lot of people, so can't help but talk about her. And she's just an amazing, figure in movie history, and of course a tragic figure as well. So that's always unfortunate, and that's just another thing that adds to her aura and mystique. So thanks a lot, and want to hear you guys' take on Thelma Todd again. Thanks. Bye.
Greetings all. My name is Ben Wink, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast. If these thoughts on Horse Feathers were brought up by others already, I apologize, as I unconsciously steal from only the best. These were quickly collected points that are full of whimsy, but I'm always that way after I have radishes. With the first round of 1930s films getting added to the public domain ranks this forthcoming January in the US, what are the odds that some wonderful collector is merely biding their time until the rights to the 1932 titles expire? Could there be a complete print, or at least a complete reel of the hack section of Horse Feathers out in the wilderness somewhere? Could there be some soul who just doesn't want to give a dime to Universal? Is it too much to hope for even a beaten-up complete print to surface at this point? Are those too many questions? Are there any answers? Any bones, any rags, any bottles today? Horse Feathers was the last Marx film on my haven't seen it yet list as a child. For whatever reason, it didn't show up on the local network affiliate's late movie show, so I couldn't tape it. The local video rental place didn't have it to rent, and as you might imagine, revival houses aren't, and won't ever be big in Milwaukee. I just had no way to see it. However, my parents knew that new Marx Brothers VHS tapes were reliable gifts for my brother and me on our birthdays or for Christmas. My parents started out by getting the low-priced ones first. I won't call out which Marx film was the cheapest, I'll just say that room service was the initial acquisition. Then Christmas 1990, a brand new Horse Feathers VHS was there under the tree. My brother and I couldn't wait. Watching it over Christmas break, it was such a breath of fresh air, seeing peak Marxes causing mayhem. Everything was moving along swimmingly. Then we got to the Marxes in Thelma Todd's apartment, and the film started having missing footage, clip lines of dialogue, weird, jerky edits. It was confusing to say the least, so my brother and I assumed that our new tape had a manufacturing flaw. But since we knew that our folks had probably paid $30 to $40 for this movie, so we'd have a Merry Christmas, we didn't want to distress our mother by making her think that she ruined the holiday by getting us this apparently broken tape. More importantly, we knew they certainly weren't going to buy it again for their picky children. In the end, we decided to live with this obviously defective VHS that had a choppy print for that section of the movie. Fortunately, we later discovered that everybody's home video versions have a choppy print for that section of the movie. So that meant we were happily part of a larger group of disappointed Marx fans stuck with this hacked-up version. It ended up being a Christmas miracle. Now, for my mildly earned money, Horse Feathers has the best overall music of any Marx film. Now, I realize that's a bit of a cheat, given how one song is spread out to each of the four brothers to individually perform, but when you take the charming Everyone Says I Love You, combine it with my overall favorite Groucho musical performance of I'm Against It, I Always Get My Man, and sprinkle in the rambunctious title and end credits music, it results in Horse Feathers not having a musical turkey to reluctantly sit through or fast forward to get past. A close second is Animal Crackers, but since that film must endure the shame of never recording the Marxes performing for the Three Musketeers for posterity, therefore I still rank it after Horse Feathers. Would Huxley versus Darwin really pull that big of a crowd? Remember, Huxley's a complete dog that Darwin is expected to crush easily. I can only imagine the days after gladiators, bear baiting, and witch trials, but before cable TV, the internet, Chia Pets, Super Mario Brothers, and fidget spinners, that getting to witness anything in person in 1932 was a thrilling prospect. Perhaps the Huxley mob was like the pre-2016 Chicago Cubs fan base, usually selling out to capacity to witness their lovable losers at the friendly confines. At least that crowd got to witness an impromptu chariot race onto the field, so perhaps those season tickets came in handy, because you never knew what you were going to witness. And finally, I suppose Jennings is our villain, kind of, sort of, in this one. And what is his master plan here? We only know he's gambled his bankroll to bet on dear old Darwin, but how much money does Jennings think he's actually going to win on the game? What kind of odds could he possibly be getting? Zeppo says that Huxley hasn't won a game since 1888. That makes for 44 seasons of solid evidence that Huxley is a guaranteed gridiron loser against any opponent for any game on any given Saturday. And also, there is nothing relayed in the plot that things are going to be different for Huxley's team this year, like they got a great coach or a new star player or anything like that. And Jennings doesn't mention any wager on just the point spread or making any prop bets. He just bet it all on Darwin to win outright. The betting book knows Huxley's a constant loser with no new information that could change their minds, so a payout on Darwin has got to be minuscule, right? Like betting $1,000 just to win $25. And for that measly return, Jennings is laying out additional cash to not only to buy 2 pro ringers, but also buy signals from Baravelli? And after that, he sends Thelma Todd out to romance Groucho to get game plans, which makes sense because Jennings knows that all college presidents have intimate knowledge of the football team's playbook. Frankly, since Huxley is terrible, Jennings shouldn't even care about their signals, because obviously Huxley couldn't execute them anyway. Come to think of it, given the fact that a Huxley win would be a huge long shot, wouldn't the better play have been getting Mullen and McCarty to play for Huxley instead, getting the surprise win over Darwin? Think of how Jennings could have doubled or tripled his bankroll by then betting on Huxley to win, presumably spending the rest of the movie flush with cash and in the arms of Thelma Todd. But no, not Jennings, big dope. And remember that by the end of the movie, Jennings ends up being so insignificant that we don't even get cutaways of close-ups of him in the stands, seeing him get more and more angry, slowly getting his comeuppance at that not well thought out plan, and it evaporates before his eyes, ultimately due to the quartet of insanity, driving a garbage wagon filled with footballs into the end zone. Instead, we get, well, nothing really. And at the end, we all know that Jennings is a sucker and the reason why off-track betting is so lucrative. With all due love and respect to Biffle and Schuster, need I say more? Well, that just about wraps it up. Gentlemen, this podcast is an oasis in a desert of entertainment, and I'd walk a mile for a calomel to get there. So down the hatch and on my way, and thank you.
Hi, this is Anthony Strand. Of the 5 Marx Brothers movies that I really love, Horse Feathers has always been my least favorite. It kind of loses me at the end. I don't really think the football sequence is that funny. I've never really enjoyed it that much, so I have it a little bit lower than most of the other Paramounts. In my day job, I'm a school librarian. I teach library classes to students kindergarten through 5th grade. And one of the books that I read is Sharko and Hippo by Elliot Kalin, a book you might have heard of. It's about a shark and a hippo who are based on Chico and Harpo. The hippo keeps pulling the wrong thing out of his coat pocket, etc. Kids love the book. It's a big hit. It's always been a big hit. So I follow it up with a few Marx Brothers clips. I always start with the flashlight scene from Animal Crackers. And then I've shown the stateroom scene from A Night at the Opera. I've shown the lemonade stand from Duck Soup. I've shown the scene in Trentino's office in Duck Soup. And kids love it. I mean, these are kindergartners. They're 5 and 6 years old. And what has delighted me is that a lot of them keep asking to see the Marx Brothers. Can we see those funny brothers? Can we watch the Sharko and Hippo video again? You know, it happens a lot. It's been really a joy for me in the past 2 school years. But so with this podcast coming up, I decided maybe the kindergartners can help me appreciate the end of Horse Feathers, because they're laughing so hard at these other clips. I thought surely they'll laugh at this one. And I was right. On the last day of school, I had a class of kindergartners and we watched the last 18 minutes of Horse Feathers, starting from when Harpo and Chico go to kidnap the 2 football players. And it was so fun for me just to see how the kids reacted. I think that the actual kidnapping scene is brilliant. I always have. I love it. But what I thought was fascinating was when Chico asked for the pick and Harpo lets a pig out of his bag, the kids were locked in right away because they recognized that as a callback to Animal Crackers, or for them, a callback to Sharko and Hippo, right? That's what Hippo does in the book, pull out the wrong thing. So they laughed at that. But then when they're in the room and Chico asks Harpo to pull out a rope and he pulls out a rope, one kid was very surprised. He actually said out loud, "Wow, he understands now?" Because that's not what Harpo does. He doesn't pull out the right object. So that felt like a reversal. That felt like a twist. Obviously, he throws it out the window and all that, and kids laughed. Huge laughs from the kids in that scene included Harpo getting tough, doing this crazy breathing thing. They loved that. Harpo hanging the poster of the lady. They loved that, especially the second time. That got a huge laugh. Biggest laugh of that scene was when Harpo and Chico cut through the floor. Again, especially the second time when they fall on the ladies' bridge game. The kids were screaming. They were going so crazy for that. Also, of course, when we see them in their long underwear, a guaranteed laugh. But then I was really, again, interested to see what would happen once we got to the football field. And they continued to love it. Like, these children convinced me that this is, in fact, a great comedy scene. Harpo riding his chariot to the stadium, they were going crazy. They really, really went nuts when Harpo pulls off his shirt and it becomes this long shirt, right? That long sequence. One girl yelled, "Rewind it! I want to watch it again!" Because they just loved it. They didn't laugh the first time Harpo and Chico played cards on the bench, but when they played cards out on the field, the kids got very excited about that. When Harpo hands Darwin the football and then does the fake out and they tackle the guy, that got some applause actually. They loved Harpo chasing the dog. Of course, kids love to see a dog. And then when he rides the chariot across the goal line, the kids were going nuts. Harpo is truly their hero. And it's so reassuring and it gives me such hope for the future to see how much these kids love Harpo. They also kept commenting on the football action, which is something that would never have occurred to me. Like, some of the kids were following it as an actual football game that they wanted to, see who won. And finally, they were very confused when the 3 Marx Brothers all marry Thelma Todd at the end, because they didn't even know Thelma Todd was in it. But again, they laughed. Funny's funny. One final note from me, not from the kids. It's a little weird, I think, that we see Harpo put a rope on the ball so he can do the bouncing up and down trick that he's going to do magically in Duck Soup. That feels more like an MGM Harpo thing to me. I'm approaching 5 minutes here, so I'll stop. But I can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say. Looking forward to the podcast. Thank you.
Hello, Marx Brothers Country Podcast. I'm Gavin from Glasgow, and here are my Horse Feathers thoughts, feelings, and tangential ponders that I've waxed wroth about. I often feel Horse Feathers gets a bit lost in the mix. The Coconuts is notable for being the first. Animal Crackers gained cult status when it was hard to find for a while. Plus, Captain Spaulding is Groucho's most recognisable character. And Monkey Business stands out as the first movie that moves. Then there's Horse Feathers. To me, just kind of nestles in the middle. But I know Eddie Deason in capital letters doesn't feel this way, as he's mentioned many times before that it's his favourite of the Marx Brothers. And then after that, you have Duck Soup and A Night of Opera. These ones always turn up on best films of all time, 1001 films before you snuff it. As a kid, I was not only confused by Zeppel being ironed by Grouch on the VHS and the DVD, but I was also confused by the title, as it didn't relate to anything in the film. I did my research, and Horse Feathers is old slang for saying that's ridiculous, that's stupid, that sort of thing. And seeing that it's slang, that means it doesn't translate well internationally either. In Germany, it's called Blossoming Nonsense. France, The Four Madmen. Italy, The Marx Brothers at College. And in Portugal, Geniuses of the Ball. So staying with Portugal, there is a blog post about the movie called Lost in Translation, Odd Classic Film Titles in Portuguese, Marx Brothers edition. The poster writes about the title translations and the confusing task of translating the dialogue itself that is full of Groucho's wordplay and Chico's misunderstanding and mishearing of the English language. I never thought any of the Paramount era titles were very good. They remind me of the original title idea for the British sitcom Dad's Army. And if you don't know Dad's Army, it's about the Home Guard in the Second World War, and the sitcom is inspired by the experiences of the writer Jimmy Perrin, who was a young teenager not old enough to fight in the war, so he was in a regiment with retired soldiers who were too old to fight in the war. Jimmy Perrin was very keen on the title The Fighting Tigers, but along the way he was encouraged to change the title and it became Dad's Army, and I think that's a much better idea for the show, as you kind of get a better idea what it's about. So back to the Marx Brothers. I gave myself a task. What if each film had to be renamed with the name of a different comedy film? And I came up with The Coconuts, Guest House Paradiso from 1999, Animal Crackers, High Society, 1956, Monkey Business, The Boat That Rocked, 2009, Horse Feathers, Back to School, 1986, and then Duck Soup, The Dictator, from 2012. I'll allow Chaplin to have The Great Dictator. This film could easily be remade into a Revenge of the Nerds, Porky's, or American Pie film. It's all there, very tame, but it's all there. You've got the college setting, authority mocking, focus on mischief and subversion, and raunchy humour, and boundary pushing for the time. So that raunchy humour and boundary pushing would be right from the get-go. Zeppo as a girl on his lap, Thelma Todd's mere existence as a college widow with all the brothers coming and going from her room is very American Pie-esque. Chico and Harpo forcing a kiss on the students beside them, and Groucho telling a young student that it wouldn't be fun having Harpo stay after class. In this film, Zeppo is definitely more entwined with his brothers here. It helps that Everyone Says I Love You carries on between all the brothers, stamping his place as a Marx brother. But he still disappears though, and something that would have made the film more enticing would give Zeppo something to do, as if he and Groucho were fighting more over Thelma Todd. I would love to draw listeners' attention to the YouTube video Horse Feathers, Marx Brothers mime, Russell Thompson, which was uploaded by the channel name Cartoons by Stan Thompson. It's a 1995 British father and son miming to the beginning of Horse Feathers. I know it's a British home movie, as every 90s home had that template. You weren't allowed to deviate from that. All my gran and aunt's house looked like that. So the video begins with the retiring college president, played by the dad, handing over to Groucho. The dad subtly pulls at a string that pans to the camera over to his 15-year-old son as Groucho, shaving in the mirror. It's a very charming performance, and I love the attention to detail, such as Groucho's slip, stumble around the table, and the production value is a mortarboard hat made from cardboard, black electrical tape for the moustache and eyebrows, and a black dressing gown for Groucho's role. And of course, Zeppo's part gets cut. Poor Zeppo. The dad exits the scene so he can dash around the camera to pan down and back up a bit so he can get all of his son in shot as he crawls under the desk to pop back up. So the performance continues into the beard pulling with non-existent professors because there's none in the living room. And then Groucho climbs up on the furniture for the big finale. But it ends with Groucho disappearing into analogue mess. And then a glorious royal blue screen with all the old VHS symbolism. Cassette icon, SP meaning standard play, rewind symbol, a time counter ticking backwards, and the capitalised text saying remain 24 seconds at the bottom right hand corner. Yes, so I may have over-analysed the ending, but it's a really wholesome time capsule of pre-internet takeover and creativity at its finest, cobbled together with a string and cardboard aesthetic. It's what people do now on TikTok, dancing and miming to music with snippets of audio. It reminds me of putting on shows with my cousin that my grandparents were forced to watch. I own a Huxley college jumper I bought on Redbubble years ago. It was too big when I ordered it, but I couldn't exchange it because the seller had stopped selling in the small window of me buying it and trying on. I really wish the seller still existed because I could do with a bigger size now. So fun observations. The Speakeasy on 24 Elm Street. Did this inspire the street name for A Nightmare on Elm Street? I felt so clever when I saw my first Marx Brothers reference out in the wild. I figured out from the back of the VHS of the film Swordfish, the one that stars John Travolta, Hugh Jackman and Halle Berry, was clearly a Marx Brothers reference because it was about computer hackers. I felt so clever, but I didn't really have anybody to show off how clever I was. And is this the first film where the brothers drink alcohol? And they're such tiny glasses of beer as well. But beer is beer, I guess. Harpo is peak Paramount magic realism in this film. The moment he pulls a steaming cup of coffee from his pocket is pure brilliance. I was so inspired by this as a kid that I cut a hole in my own jacket pocket and then into the lining, and that meant that I could pull stuff out of my pocket. Massive oversized prop to people's amazement. That kind of magic doesn't land well in Love Happy because you can literally see he has just got big pockets and it ends up looking clunky. He's way down rather than looking whimsical. Harpo's pockets should feel like the TARDIS and Doctor Who, impossible pockets that are bigger on the inside. And I love Harpo's aesthetic in this film. I assume his torn-up clothes are because he's playing a dog catcher, which makes sense, I presume, if you're dealing with dogs all day. And I would have loved Harpo just to be that dog catcher character in all the films, as long as he's also still partner in crime with Chico. And it would have been a perfect touch if this was a film where he had the dog tattoo, given that he's a dog catcher. It's also great that his love for horses carries over from Animal Crackers. The moment he whistles at the horse as the person that he loves is perfect continuity. It's subtle, but it ties everything together. And continuing on with the Harpo with the horses, if the Marx Brothers ever got a modern reboot like the Three Stooges got, I would love to reimagine Harpo's woman-chasing gag. He'd still chase the girl, but then we'd cut to a dreamlike romantic sequence. The woman is riding on the horse, a giant white horse. Harpo walks beside it, guiding it by the reins gently through a field. They both smile at each other, and they both wear flowing white robes, and Harpo's tossing confetti over themselves whilst a harp plays softly in the background. So just a couple of random thoughts and bits to mention. So can Groucho teleport? He's standing in the classroom next to Robert Gregg, and then it jump cuts to him standing over him, standing on some furniture. The bit where he says, "What? No bacon? I'd send that back if I was you." And also, does Groucho wear fake shoes? I'd love to know more information about these fake shoes. We don't get to see them that clearly. Thelma Todd and Chico are definitely enjoying each other's company. She's definitely putting her hand around his waist and maybe feeling a bit of his bum. She also taps him on the back and time the music. A debate for the centuries. Jumping Anaconda versus Jumping Butterball. And how many years will it take for Groucho's "you folks go to the lobby" line will just be confusing? Will they still have a lobby? Will people know what a lobby is in 5,000 years' time? Or will there be a big accompanying book that you need to read after or before a Marx Brothers film, like the way people do with James Joyce's Ulysses? It feels like a million years ago now, but when I started practicing guitar, that's when I noticed Groucho's guitar is swapped out for a totally different guitar when he's thrown it into the water. I presume the one that he plays is his own guitar that we see in photographs of him at home. I fully understood the lifesaver joke after living in Australia. I did get the joke, but I thought it was a polo mint that like we have here in Britain. It's a mint with a hole in it. And then I saw a packet of lifesavers in Australia and I realised I was missing a little bit of the joke. And I think not having the ending be the college burning down whilst they play cards is a crime against humanity, because the ending that we get feels a bit slapdashed and a bit fantastical. But it's nice to see that fantastical ending is what we can only describe as a charming polycule. You know, very forward thinking to have a polyamorous wedding to end a film in the 1930s.
And here is Ben Urish.
Greetings, fellow council members. Here is my horse feathers story. And from what I recall from some postings, some other people may have had a similar experience. I was part of a film society in the 70s and 80s that showed films mostly on a university campus. And at one point, we scheduled Horse Feathers. This was on a weeknight, like Wednesdays, like at 7 and 10 o'clock. Wanted to book a short with it. I think the short where the Three Stooges play football. But we didn't have enough money in the budget, so Horse Feathers was going to play on its own. Okay, we booked things about a semester in advance. So finally the semester comes around and Horse Feathers is playing. I am helping the box office person for the 7 o'clock show. I hear the film start in the theater. I don't want to miss Groucho's opening, having seen the film before, so I rush in, and what do I see on the screen? I see the football game from Horse Feathers. So I tear out of the theater, through the lobby, throw open the door, run up the flight of stairs to the projection booth, and running in a panic, the projectionist and the head of the Student Activities Council are there. And I say, stop, you've got the wrong reel on. This is the end of the film. And they said, no, at the last minute, we got the budget money and we went ahead and booked a short. And I immediately knew what had happened. They had booked the Pigskin Capers short, which is, of course, a cut down of the end of Horse Feathers. And I said, it's not a real short. It's the end of the movie. Well, that didn't make sense to them. And I argued and said, stop it. Just stop it now. Start the film. You're spoiling the ending. But they wouldn't do it. So it played through. I was pretty pissed off and kind of depressed about what was going to happen. So I went back down, went into the theater. The film started playing. People loved it. Big laughs all the way through. Everything you have read about or thought would get a big laugh does. Interestingly, the one thing that really fell flat was the famous probable S.J. Perlman joke about the dean waxing wroth. That got stone cold silence, or maybe one person doing one of those I know what that means kind of laughs. But that did not communicate well. The biggest laugh in the entire picture was Groucho throwing Thelma Todd the lifesaver. Not only is it a funny visual and pun kind of gag, but I think a lot of people were surprised to discover that Lifesavers was an old enough candy that it existed back then as a popular enough brand that it would get mentioned and the audience would know what it was. And of course, that's when the film was only half as old as it is now. Anyway, what's great about Horse Feathers, I'm sure other people are talking about, the idea that each brother gets a turn at the song in their own sort of characteristically distinctive fashion. Zeppo actually has some good bits with Groucho, particularly early on. His scene with Thelma Todd is good. Anyway, all the way through, a great film. So the film plays, and as I said, big laughs and everything. When it gets to the point where the football game is starting, people really very quickly, of course, figured out that, oh no, we just saw this. a little over an hour ago, there was an audible groan and then grumblings from the audience, and people started filtering out. And the more it became evident after barely just a minute or so that they had already seen this, a lot of them just got up and walked out, even in the dark of the theater. And they were muttering and grumbling angrily all the way out. By the time the film actually ended, there were probably just a few members of the Film Society and a small handful of the public left. Very disappointing. Anyway, that's my Horse Feathers story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hi, Marx Brothers Council. I'm Howard Megdal.
And I'm Juliet Megdal.
I have been a lifelong fan of the Marx Brothers. I first saw A Night at the Opera, was my first, when I was younger than Juliet is now. Juliet's 11. And we have been watching one by one the Marx Brothers films together. Juliet, what have you seen?
I've seen Duck Soup, Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, and The Night at the Opera. And that is actually the way that I would rank them from first to last.
So Horse Feathers is actually my favorite film. This is the second time Juliet and I are watching it. I've watched it too many times to count. A huge thank you to Marx Brothers Council. It's given me a chance to know that there are people who are as obsessive about the Marx Brothers as I am. And so I've been able to share this with both my children. So we watched tonight so that we could share some of our thoughts with you guys. Juliet, what were some of your favorite scenes in the movie?
So one of my favorite was the scene at the speakeasy where they kept saying swordfish and they kept locking each other out. That was really funny. And then the other...
Was there a line that you particularly liked? I thought there was a joke they make in the speakeasy scene that you...
Oh, yeah. Where they said, isn't it illegal to buy football players at a speakeasy? That's really funny.
We got to have a fun conversation about what prohibition was. And I'm a sports journalist for a living, so I think there was an understanding about the buying of football players here, too. A scene that I really love, and I just wish didn't have the cuts in it that, I know you guys have talked about the scenes in great detail, like what was cut out of the script because of the possible Hays Code violations and some that were just lost because of the issues with film preservation. But the music lesson scene, I think, is amazing. It's one of my favorite bits they have in any of their movies. Juliet, what else for you?
The other scene that I really liked was the opening song of whatever it is, I'm Against It, and when they all like dance around each other, and that's really funny to me.
I think it's really good. You know, the music is so good in this. Obviously, like this to me is a near perfect Marx Brothers movie. Like, the only thing that's missing, obviously, is Margaret Dumont, and if we could find a way to get Margaret Dumont in it, then that would be perfect. But you've got an amazing harp solo from Harpo, amazing piano from Chico. The fact that, again, everyone says I love you is, it's hard to pronounce it the way they do it. And you guys have talked about that too, about the emphasis. But everyone says I love you is just such a great song. And the fact that we get all four Marx Brothers singing it. That scene on the boat, I just absolutely love, to watch Juliet rolling her eyes when Thelma Todd was talking, the baby talk. But it's great because Groucho just doesn't put up with it at all. And so, again, if I had any sort of thing I would change in this, I think the football part of the movie, I know we're leading up to the big game with Mullen and McCarty, but it could probably be a little shorter. But other than that, just a movie that I absolutely love. Juliet, you ranked it, you said fourth of the five we've seen so far. But did you enjoy it? Did you love it?
The only reason why it's so low is because the others are so good.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep watching these together. You'll notice a bunch of movies that aren't yet on the list. I wanted her to see all the great ones first. But thank you so much. The podcast is amazing, and I can't wait to hear this and all the other podcasts.
And now, here's Chad Smith. I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to Matthew, Noah, and Bob for allowing me to give my views on horse feathers. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using this funny Australian accent, it's because I'm Australian. I'm in my early 60s, and I've been a Marx Brothers fan since the mid-80s, when this friend I knew kept coming to fancy dress parties as Groucho Marx. And when I found out who Groucho was, and I watched a few of their movies, I was hooked. My friend found the Marx Brothers accidentally one night while at our local drive-in theatre. He was there to watch another movie, and he planned to go home before the second feature came on. But when the first movie finished, he was hungry, so he went to the cafeteria and got some food. And when he came back, the second movie had started, and he watched it while he was eating. He could not remember laughing so hard, so he stayed until the end. That movie was Duck Soup. Now, while Duck Soup isn't my absolute Marx Brothers favourite, Horse Feathers is. It's 68 minutes jam-packed with laughs from beginning to end. For mine, there is not a bad scene or joke in the film. I especially love Groucho's breaking of the fourth wall while Chico was playing the piano. It was not something new for him, but the timing and the hilarity of the line was brilliant, prefaced by the monkey's uncle joke with David Landau. Now, the film contains my favourite Marx Brothers song, yes, one I like even better than Hooray for Captain Spaulding or Lydia the Tattooed Lady, and that song is Everyone Says I Love You. All the brothers perform it, even Harpo, who whistles the tune to his horse. You know, even Woody Allen must have liked it. It's not long, but this swordfish password scene is brilliant. Now, when he was much younger, my 15-year-old son Andrew would do this scene with me for anyone who came to our house. He'd memorise the dialogue, and he even had Groucho's delivery. Of course, at 15, he's much too old for it now, as it is not cool, so we don't do it anymore. But he still cracks a smile when he hears the dialogue. Now, if anyone I know has not seen a Marx Brothers film, the first one I show them is Horse Feathers. You know, if they can't laugh at this one, they won't laugh at any of them. It's worth noting that there's a lot of physical comedy in the film as well, you know, especially that scene in Connie Bailey's apartment where Harpo brings in the ice and Groucho and Chico are constantly running through it. You know, while Zeppo was still in his early 30s, you know, the rest were early to mid-40s and started to slow down a bit. So I think they did pretty well. Actually, I don't think Chico did much running as he was recovering from a serious car accident that delayed production, and in most of his scenes they had him sitting down or being doubled by someone else, you know, especially in the football game. The movie does contain some aspect of sentimentality for me personally, as it was released the year my dad was born. Now, he wasn't a Marx Brothers fan, but Matthew will be delighted to know his favourite team was Laurel and Hardy. He absolutely loved them. I don't think there's anything in this film to analyse too much. It was just meant to be funny and keep people happy and have them laughing. And in this, it succeeded. And now, before I finish up, there are some final thoughts I have on Thelma Todd. It is really quite sad to know that within 4 years of making this picture, she would be dead. She is quite rightly remembered as one of the better actresses to be associated with the Marx Brothers, you know, first with Monkey Business and then with Horse Feathers. It makes me wonder if they would have used her in any future Marx Brothers movies. Now, she was still alive when Duck Soup was made, but she wasn't cast. But, you know, probably didn't suit the Raquel Torres role, and the role of Trentino's secretary was probably too small for an actress of her calibre. And, of course, Maggie was Maggie, and no one else but Maggie plays her part. And by the time Night of the Opera came along, she'd passed away. Of course, her death still remains a mystery up until this day and will probably never be solved. There are many more things I could say about Horse Feathers, but I want to make Bob's job easier by him not having to edit too much. Having said that, He may edit all of this. Who knows? Thanks again for giving me this opportunity to talk on the podcast. It has been terrific, and I cannot wait until we launch into Dead Duck Soup. Thanks again, and I really loved the Elliot Gould podcast that you did with him recently as well. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you all soon.
Here's another contribution from our friend Matt from Bristol, not to be confused with Matt from Skokie.
Just like with Monkey Business, not only is Horse Feathers one of the best Marx Brothers films, but this is one of the best comedies of all time. I'm Against It is up there with some of the best of the Marx Brothers songs. The speakeasy scene has many great jokes, as does the rest of the movie, with gags like, "Where's the seal?" And then Harpo responds by putting an actual live seal on the table. Great acting, writing, and directing throughout. But the part that makes Horse Feathers stand out the most is its climax. From the way Harpo and Chico escape from captivity, to Groucho giving a team talk to the wrong team before Zeppo having to tell him, and then, of course, the second half of the American football match, where we see many funny physical moments from Harpo Marx. From tackling the referee after he was told to tackle the man with the ball, to rigging the score, to cheating in all these different ways. It was a gut-busting, hilarious climax, and it's possibly the best Marx Brothers film of all time.
Okay, here is the contribution that was used in our Patreon bonus segment from Dan Federa.
Greetings, Matthew, Noah, and Bob. If you'd indulge me, I want to begin by thanking you for the amount of joy I have gotten from this podcast starting in February to the present. In that time, I have burned through all 81 episodes of the podcast and learned just how much time I spend driving to and from work, to and from dance classes, walking the dog, and hiding in closets. Normally, joy of this caliber calls for sharing said experience with my wife, but her not listening to the show means that she will continue to not know how much money I have spent on books, Blu-rays, frames for posters, t-shirts, etc., etc. When I hear other members share their thoughts and insights, I'm usually in awe of two things. One, how similar the depth of admiration is amongst everyone, and two, how I almost always look at things in a different light. I am not quite as confident in my academic observations, and I feel that there's little that I could add to the conversation in that regard. I do, however, have some experiences that I wonder if you and or others could relate to. Over the past few months, a lot of Marx-centric memories have come back to me. The brothers have always been a part of my world for as long as I can remember, but there have been some instances that drifted off and through this crash course have resurfaced, and I'd like to take this opportunity to share them. For example, back in 1994-1995, I was getting all the girls from being in a barbershop quartet. We didn't have barrels, but we did have the opportunity to perform at Epcot Center, and part of that time was spent at Universal Studios, where many characters sauntered around and interacted with the visitors. One gentleman, in a yellowish tweed suit, made eye contact with me, and it was on. I don't remember any of the jokes except for his last one, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he asked if I knew which city in the United States was liked least by elephants. I was young, I was cocky, I was in a barbershop quartet. I couldn't hold back. Tuscaloosa, I quickly blurted out. And his breaking of character for that split second told me that he was not prepared to have some young upstart know where he was poaching his humor from. Off he went in a minute and a huff. Now, the next two instances are both rooted in horse feathers and will finally lead to a question, I promise. Years ago, my parents ran a small convenience store in an office space in the Bronx, and one day I was covering for my mom. One of her regulars approached the counter, and not seeing my mom, asked, "Who are you?" Beaming with pride, I didn't miss a beat, and I responded with, "I'm fine. Who are you?" She was not amused at all, and her tone spoke volumes. With that infamous thoroughbred look in her eye, she coldly stated, "I didn't say how. I said who." Didn't work out. My last anecdote is perhaps the most painful. In college, I took a film class that met at 9 a.m. on Friday mornings. And the moment that I looked at the syllabus on that first day and saw that Horse Feathers was listed, I could not wait. It would be my first time seeing a Marx Brothers film on a screen bigger than my own TV, and not to mention that day I wouldn't have to take any notes, so I was very excited. The morning arrived, I was more than ready. The class began, our professor went over the information that everybody else needed to know when watching, and then asked if there were any questions. I raised my hand and proudly asked, "When you going to cut the watermelon open?" To say he didn't respond would be putting it kindly. Looking past me and through me at the same time, he stood there for 2 seconds, acting as though absolutely nothing had transpired, and started the film. I won't tell you what went through my head during the duration of that class, but suffice it to say, it would not have made it past the Hayes office. So I suppose my question to you all is this. Have you ever come across or tried to start any Marx Brothers humor in the wild? And if so, how did it go? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? Thank you so much for this opportunity, gentlemen, ? And I look forward to your response.
Okay, here's a contribution from Roy Maltby.
Huxley College has existed at least since 1888. The establishing shot of the college should show the college's grandest old building, but we see a building that looks more modern and cheaper than I would expect. That seems especially odd if this was a matte painting made for this film. And if it is a matte painting, it means we're starting with a cartoon drawing followed by a matte painting of the same scene. Chico's character is called Baravelli. His character was called Ravelli in Animal Crackers and in the radio series Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel. It seems pretty lazy to change his name just by adding "ba." The anatomy classroom has at least 3 skulls. Maybe the professor is clumsy and he wants to make sure he has some spares. Sound recording seems to have improved tremendously in the 3 years since the Coconuts. Here we have Groucho and Thelma Todd in a moving canoe on a lake, and the sound is just fine. Maybe I'm easily baffled, but I wonder about some things. There must be electricity to record the sound, right? Where do they get electricity in the middle of a lake? The front of the canoe is out of frame. Maybe there's another boat supplying electricity and cables to microphones. But where does that boat get its electricity? And how is the canoe moving? Thelma Todd is paddling, but not enough for the motion of the canoe that we see. There isn't any sound of a motor. Is there another canoe ahead of this one towing it? The camera seems to be moving too. Is it on another boat or is it on tracks on land? If the camera's on another boat, why don't we hear a motor? Later in the film, which is worse, sunburn or concussion? At the football game, almost everyone in the audience wears a fedora, but several players do not wear helmets. Chico speaks Italian in 3 different scenes in this film. He did not speak so much Italian in any earlier film. Assuming it is genuine Italian, I wouldn't know. In podcast episode 41, the podcasters say that this is the Marx Brothers film missing the most material, and it's because after the film's original release in 1932, when the motion picture industry started adhering to the Hays Code in 1934, the film was re-edited to get approved by the Hays office. In the opening titles, we see that this film has MPAA number 1713, but really it would be more exciting if there wasn't an MPAA number, since I think that would mean that it's a version of the film not approved by the Hays office. Something I don't understand, though, is that the Coconuts and Animal Crackers do not have MPAA numbers in the opening titles, even though they say passed by the National Board of Review. Monkey Business does have an MPAA number on screen. Noah says that Horse Feathers has the only recording of Whatever It Is I'm Against It by anyone, as far as he knows. Well, I can tell you that I have sung this song on stage a few times at open mic events. But fortunately for listeners, there's no recording of my performances, so this does not affect Noah's statement. And finally, podcast guest Adam Gopnik compares Horse Feathers with Gilbert and Sullivan. His choice of a song at the end of the episode is by Groucho and the Mikado. The Mikado is partly about the problem of an executioner who might be out of a job because there are no criminals left to execute. So he has this song about a list of people who could be executed and no one would mind. In the productions of the Mikado that I've seen, this list was altered to have modern complaints. Groucho uses a version that I think is considered the official version now, but to avoid offending audiences in other times and places, it has 2 changes from the original version used in London in 1885. Where Groucho sings the Banjo Serenader, the original words were the N-word Serenader. Everything I've read about this says that Gilbert was not referring to singers of color, he was referring to singers in blackface. I'm not sure whether to take Banjo Serenader as a euphemism for blackface serenader, or more literally, any serenader playing banjo. As far as I recall, none of the Marx Brothers ever played a banjo in their films, so I guess it's okay to put Banjo Serenaders on the list. The one other revision to the list is where Groucho sings The Girl Who's Not Been Kissed. The original was The Lady Novelist.
This is Dan O'Farrell from Southampton in the UK. I like to consider myself a friend of the podcast, although maybe an imaginary friend. So I wanted to say something about horse feathers. I'm not sure I have anything startling to add, but I've enjoyed the previous episodes with council members' contributions and frankly was feeling FOMO. So a couple of points that occurred to me rewatching Horse Feathers recently. The first one is, I guess, is linked to my family history a bit in that as lots of us share, the person who really got me into the Marx Brothers was my dad, who was a long-time fan. And the other thing that my dad was really into, bizarrely, was Gilbert and Sullivan. So much so that he ended up being chairman of the Southampton Operatic Society, even though he couldn't sing a note, because he liked leaping around in the chorus, and sort of singing the odd note, and things like Pirates of the Penzance and stuff. And that all came flooding back to me, actually, watching Horse Feathers this time. That opening scene with Groucho and the professors is, to me, maybe the most GNS that the Marx Brothers ever get. And obviously that makes total sense, given Groucho's later performance in the Mikado and stuff like that. He's obviously a fan. And I guess, there's an influence of Gilbert and Sullivan at the time, which maybe nowadays it's seen, even though it's still a lively scene, certainly in this country, we maybe forget how influential and how funny actually Gilbert's words are. And that kind of, I don't know, there's a certain joy to it, isn't there, which I think the Marx Brothers certainly share. Obviously, the two things seem quite separate, and Gilbert and Sullivan on one level seems more hidebound. But that bit with the professors just really reminds me of a classic Gilbert and Sullivan kind of patter song, with the main character kind of leaping around and Groucho's extraordinary dancing, and then these slightly wonky and maybe slightly more uncomfortable extras doing the kind of the kind of choreography that they always give to male choruses in the shows that I ended up being in, just to kind of support my dad, where you're kind of half a beat off and kind of dressed as policemen or pirates or yeomen, kind of shuffling around, doing these slightly hokey moves. It just reminded me of that, and it made me smile. And it's, a lovely scene anyways, but I do wonder if that's if there's a doctoral thesis to be written one day of the influence of Gilbert and Sullivan on early Hollywood comedies, someone else can write it, but I think, it maybe is interesting. And the other point I wanted to make is just that speakeasy scene. I'm sure everyone will have something to say about the speakeasy scene, but I think it's my go-to scene to kind of, when I try and convert my kids to enjoy the Marx Brothers. There's a few bits. There's a couple of moments in Monkey Business. There's a couple of moments in Duck Soup, but that speakeasy scene for just introducing all their different types of humor in like 1 5-minute patch is peerless, I think. And I guess, I wish the rest of Horse Feathers was just that. But it's good. It's all good. I do love the film. I think it's, I keep changing in my head whether I prefer that to Monkey Business or the other way around. Probably at the moment, slightly prefer Monkey Business, but that, I think the good bits in Horse Feathers are almost better than anything else. for me. Anyway, I'll stop burbling. Thank you.
Hi, this is Eddie Deason. I want to say my thoughts on my favorite Marx Brothers film, Horse Feathers. Horse Feathers has always been my favorite Marx Brothers film. I'm a purist. I like, of course, the first five. The first five are my favorite. Horse Feathers is my very, very favorite. Monkey Business a close second. Then I might go to Duck Soup, then to Animal Crackers, then to Coconuts. But those are my favorites. It's an interesting irony that Zeppo, it'll be an enigma for all time. It's some kind of a weird oxymoron in the universe that Zeppo Marx, the single most ridiculed figure in the history of show business, the single most throwaway, non-interesting, dispensable character in the history of showbiz, made the Marx Brothers films better, and we don't quite know why. I don't know why, but he made them better. He gave them a better balance. It seems to be that Harpo and Chico would go off to one side in the first five, and Groucho and Zeppo would go off to one side, and that gave the Marx Brothers a nice balance. Anyway, it has my favorite opening Marx Brothers scene, my favorite Groucho scene. The opening number where Groucho is the college professor. Now, I remember I watched this film when I was a little kid. I watched it late at night. It was like 1 a.m. Beautiful romantic moment I never forgot in the history of comedy. This is my heart as a comedian. And I was up late at night, and my dad, turned the TV on for me. I was like 8 years old or whatever. My dad turned on the TV, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "Watch for the scene where Groucho dances with the professors." He goes, "It's the best scene in the movie." And this is my favorite Groucho scene to this day. I love Groucho dancing with the professors. It's 2 numbers. All the other Groucho always gets a great singing and dancing number in every movie pretty much. But this is 2 numbers. I always get my man and whatever it is I'm against it combined. So you get 2 great numbers. We see Groucho, one of the great comedians, one of the great dancers in the history of comedy, doing his great number. It has my favorite Chico number, the number with Thelma Todd, when he plays the piano, that wonderful song. I think it's I'm Daffy Over You. I think it's a Chico composition. And he does a scene with Thelma Todd. All us Marx Brothers fans know what's going on there. You look very carefully. You see Thelma kind of give him a little pinch on the rear end. You can kind of see that they're kind of flirting with each other. Harpo's great, as always. Harpo, I think, is his most animalistic. He's the most animal in this movie. He's wild through the whole movie. He's great. The football scene might be the funniest scene in the history of sports comedies. It's brilliant. Now, this movie breaks your heart in one way. Obviously, the desecration, the broken film, the hurt film in the one scene, and it's so sad. It's kind of like a Da Vinci painting where somebody slashed it with a knife, or a Michelangelo statue where somebody knocked its head off or whatever. It's a terrible tragedy that happened. I wish it could be fixed. I guess it's that way for all time, and it's sad because the movie's a beautiful masterpiece. I love Horse Feathers. It's always been my favorite Marx Brothers film. It's a feel-good movie. It's great, and I love everything about it. And even though we don't have Maggie in it, it's a great movie, and I love it so much. Thank you very much. And by the way, keep up the great work, please. Bob Gassell, Matthew Conium, Noah Diamond. Keep up the great Marx Brothers podcast. I love them very much. Thanks for all the pleasure you bring me. Thank you.
And now, let's hear from Marty Jones.
Hello, gentlemen. When I was 10 years old in 1970, I was at a friend's house when I heard his little brother repeatedly laughing in another room. So I went in there and found the kid in front of the TV watching the Three Stooges. Well, I assumed it was the Stooges. The show had the look and sound of an old-timey movie and a frantic energy of the kind I'd only ever associated before with the Stooges. But where were Moe, Curly, and Larry? I kept waiting for them. In the meantime, who were these fellows playing football? This odd guy with a painted-on mustache and the curly-haired imp with the moronic grin. When that same character attached a rubber band to the pigskin, hurled a long bomb to a receiver only to have the ball zip back into his own arms, I laughed harder than I could ever remember laughing. Throwing banana peels on the field to trip up the opponents? To a 10-year-old, this was outrageous, hilarious fun. I was totally delighted, but it was over all too soon. What the heck did I just see? It wasn't the Three Stooges, but whatever it was, I wanted more of it. But it didn't come. The source of these few minutes of unprecedented enjoyment from a movie remained a mystery, and it stuck in my mind. A couple of years later, my dad told me that he had read in the newspaper that every day of the upcoming week, the television afternoon matinee was going to be a different film featuring a team of funny brothers, and I should check it out because he thought I'd enjoy them. He probably mentioned the brothers' names and described them, but it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't take his advice, since I preferred spending my summer afternoons outside playing with my friends. It was only at the end of the week, when a rainy day forced me indoors that I remembered what my dad had suggested. I turned on the TV, and the first thing I saw was an odd-looking man, vaguely familiar somehow, sitting in a canoe. When his female companion fell into the lake and begged he throw her a lifesaver, and he responded by tossing a lifesaver candy, I had not laughed so hard since a football game in that mystery film I had seen 2 years earlier. And it wasn't too much longer before, wait a minute, could it be? Eureka! The mystery football comedy! This, then, was how I discovered the Marx Brothers. I regretted blowing off the other movies that had been shown that week, but atoned for it by going to the library where my mom worked and finding copies of Wyatt Duck and the Marx Brothers at the movies. I educated myself in what I'd missed and became an obsessive fan before ever actually seeing anything more than the last 15 minutes of Horse Feathers. Based on my experience, today I'm convinced that for anyone aged 12 or under, there is no better introduction to the Marx Brothers than the football scene in Horse Feathers, and its heavy reliance on goofy sight gags that any kid can understand. Thank you, Marx Brother Council, for allowing me to share and opine. If you agree to keep up the good work, I will agree to keep on listening and reading. Good day.
Hi, it's Eleanor Kennedy. One of my favorite things about Horse Feathers is Everyone Says I Love You, because it demonstrates subtly that everyone says I love you in their own way. Zeppo says it straight, Groucho says it cynically, Chico says it in his own inimitable way, and Harpo says it with his harp. The song tells us that everyone can say I love you as only they can.
Hi, Glenn Davis here. Horse Feathers is a movie almost all Marx Brothers fans seem to love, but I still feel that its true greatness is somehow taken for granted. Nothing like the barrels of ink and terabytes lavished on animal crackers, duck soup, and Night at the Opera have been expended on Horse Feathers. But its 68-minute running time, another great thing about it, is jam-packed with moments that represent the very best of their kind in the entire Marx filmography, along with a number of firsts and some tremendous one-time-only highlights. I personally think it may actually have more career bests than any Marx Brothers movie. For starters, there's the start. Nothing comes out of the gate like this. Barely 30 seconds after the titles fade, Groucho is already on screen at full throttle and utterly dominating.
Well, I thought my razor was dull until I heard his speech. And that reminds me of a story that's so dirty I'm ashamed to think of it myself.
That's one of the big superlatives of this film. Horse Feathers gives us the purest, most unadulterated Groucho. Wagstaff is the Groucho persona distilled to its absolute quintessence. Nothing is not a joke, and Groucho's performance is perhaps the most high-octane of his career. So energetic, so rapid, so on top of his game, so perfectly timed. And that opening speech culminates with what I think is Groucho's greatest song.
I don't know what they have to say. It makes no difference anyway. Whatever it is, I'm against it. No matter what it is or who commenced it, I'm against it.
As if to underline that this is the most essential Groucho, we get a song that is his credo, his statement of principles, if such a thing is possible. For that reason alone, I think it is his best song of any film, not to mention how wonderfully delivered it is. But then comes an incredible bonus. Groucho's song is interrupted by a crooning Zeppo.
Knowing that as I do, I'd not advise you to displease him or tease him. No, no.
And that launches Groucho into a second song, the most baffling, disjointed, and utterly crazed song he'd ever do.
No matter if he's in Peru, Paducah, or Japan, I go ahead or live or dead, I always get my man.
And if that weren't enough, we now get Groucho's greatest dance, which is as disjointed as the song, and the corkscrew leg kicks so associated with animal crackers are actually better executed here. Groucho's delivery is totally mad as he dances on the desktop, preening gleefully, and ending a cry of triumph heard in no other film, Marx or otherwise.
I always get my man.
Next up is Chico's introduction, which I think is the best he ever got. Why? Simply because we hear his theme song before we see him. I love this because it gives Chico a star status he doesn't always get and builds anticipation for his appearance.
Hello?
Yes, lady, this is Barabella the Iceman speaking. What do you want?
And next comes Harpo in the best version of his signature costume that he ever wore. To call it distressed doesn't begin to tell it. Half the coat is essentially not there, and both pant legs are split way up the leg. Despite the flimsiness of the coat, it still contains props for some of Harpo's best practical visual gags ever, including the cup of coffee, the cutting of the cards, and the candle that burns at both ends. And we see later that it can be removed in one fell swoop when necessary, which might explain that photo from the set that was making the rounds last year.
Pretty popular place, isn't it? Yes, a hot dog stand and clean up here.
And soon we come to another epic career best, the scene in the college widow's apartment. I think this might be the best extended scene the boys ever did. My only hesitation is the unfortunate condition of the current print, but each of the brothers has wonderful moments here, and the energy never lets up. Plus, it's a hint of what the Napoleon scene must have looked like.
What are you doing here?
Why, me? I'm the music teacher. I give her singing lessons.
Since when are you taking singing lessons?
Since you came in.
What are you doing here?
I'm the plumber. I'm just hanging around in case something goes wrong with our pipes.
That's the first time I've used that joke in 20 years.
And it contains two other superlatives. There is Groucho's finest shattering of the fourth wall. He actually steps almost out of the scene entirely and then doesn't just address the audience, but refers to the fact that they are an audience in a movie theater.
I've got to stay here. But there's no reason why you folks shouldn't go out into the lobby till this thing blows over.
Pretty meta for 1932, and hard on its heels comes Chico's piano number, which I think is the most enjoyable of all his performances. Collegiate is a great choice of song, plus there's his interaction with Thelma Todd. It is so charming, so full of personality. They both shine. One wonders if they knew each other previously, given that they both were known to have connections to the Hollywood underworld. Whatever the case, it's a chance to see Chico's legendary ability to charm the ladies via his piano playing, as described so enviously by Groucho. And it gives us what might be the most real, personal, human interaction in any Marx Brothers movie. And if all that wasn't enough, we get Chico's only full song in any film.
Christopher Colombo, he write the Queen of Spain a very nice little note. And he's right all over you, baby, and then he get himself a great big boat. He's a wiser guy.
Makes you wish they'd done that more often. Horse Feathers is the only time that we get all four brothers giving us a rendition of the same song. And of course, Groucho's version is the only time he ever really plays guitar in a Marx film, and he is very good on that gorgeous Gibson L5. The football game is one of the Marx Brothers' very best big finishes, even if it wasn't always the big finish, and I'd nominate it as their very best outdoor sequence ever. The boys always felt a little out of place in actual outdoor locations, like Harpo biking across the lawn in Monkey Business, or the sequence on the rope outside the ship on Night at the Opera. But they managed to dominate here, especially with the wonderful image of Harpo riding his garbage chariot, like some sort of Greek god, and Chico's signal calling.
Signal! Una do a tray a bendy. This time we're going left-endy. Hey!
When the crew I hung out with as a kid played pickup football, Chico's signals always made an appearance sooner or later. One of the hardest things in show business or any art form is to follow up a fresh, successful creation. If you don't believe me, watch opera and races back to back. And yet the team behind Monkey Business returned with some key advances. They invented the notion of making Groucho an empowered character, put in charge for no good reason whatsoever. And they stripped down the plot to the barest of bones. And every story turn is utterly without consequence and treated as such by all involved. The triumphant football win is engineered completely outside the rules of the game, and everyone just goes along with it. In any other movie, those would all be faults, but they are perfect for the Marxes at full throttle, and there are almost no scenes without the brothers, and even those are very brief, and you get Thelma Todd, so who cares? Sandwiched between their film debut, then Animal Crackers, then their Hollywood debut on the one side, and the double dynamite of Duck Soup and A Night at the Opera on the other, I think the achievements of Horse Feathers are often taken for granted, but its list of career bests and firsts and onlys might be the longest of any film in the boys' career. It is, in short, a triumph.
Congratulations. Wonderful, Professor.
All right, scram, boys. I'll meet you in the barber shop.
As always, thanks to the council leaders, and keep up the great work.
Hi there, Marxists. This is Jack Carroll, currently from Delaware. Just wanted to put in my 2 cents about Horse Feathers, as it is part of my Marx origin story. I first discovered, well, I don't know if you'd call it classic comedy, but old school comedy with the Bowery Boys, watching them late Saturday nights on Channel 5 coming out of New York. And then kind of made me open to looking around for other things. And then one day I just landed on this strange group of guys hanging out in a bar. Next thing you know, there was a wild football game. And I said, well, all right, time to investigate this. So Horse Feathers became my first, not quite my favorite, but definitely one of the top 5. So if you're a Horse Feathers fan, you're probably a Groucho fan, because this opening is the best Groucho-centric opening of any of the movies. Kicks right into gear, fun song, busting everybody's chops. It's Groucho at its best, although it maybe has the worst looking chorus line of all time. Zeppo even gets a nice bit of exposition in there, and he seems to really love throwing that old timer out there at Groucho. The Speakeasy just has so many great gags. I mean, Swordfish, but Harpo is the one you just can't keep your eyes off of. And it just seems like once we leave the Speakeasy and we go back to the college, deal with Thelma Todd, who is such a great femme fatale in this and Monkey Business that you'd kind of wish she was playing that role in every chance she got in a Marx Brothers movie. But then once we start getting into the football kidnapping and stuff, things sort of slow down a little bit for me. The football game is fine. There's good lines in there, some neat stories, but ultimately it just is like every other football game in 30s comedies. It's wacky and has weird things going on, and it's not really particularly Marxian. I'd rather that they had stayed at the college and maybe come up with a different storyline, because it seems like there's 2 different movies going on here sometimes. But ultimately, none of the Paramounts are not worth watching a million times. Oh yeah, and all you guys who pointed out about Zeppo over the years at the end scene, I just slipped my mind most of the times I watch it, and when I just did a rewatch, I thought, oh my God, how did I not see that? That is so terrible. And they couldn't have cut it and reshot it or did something else with it or just left Zeppo out. Would have made more sense. Well, thanks for listening to me. And just got to let you guys know that I love the podcast every month and look forward to hearing more for as many years as you guys feel like doing it. Take care.
Kathy Beale here. I first encountered Horse Feathers in the pages of The Marx Brothers at the Movies by Paul Zimmerman and Burt Goldblatt. And yes, I'm one of the lucky few who owns a copy of it, and in fact have since the book first came out. The wordplay struck me as extremely clever, but it would be years before I could test that impression. The closest I came to the film for years was coming across the Time magazine cover with the brothers in the garbage chariot in their football outfit, which I, of course, had to copy and take home and stare at periodically. Ah, the plight of the girl geek. It was decades before I actually saw the film, and what a relief that the expectations that Zimmerman and Goldblatt set for it actually were met, unlike with many of the later films from the brothers' catalog, unfortunately. My favorite scene was and remains the Speakeasy, from Chico filling differently labeled bottles with obviously the same hooch, to Groucho trying to negotiate his way into the door, to Harpo harpoing throughout the bar. And of all the Harpo antics, my favorite was and remains hearing Cut the Cards and doing just that. My affection for this particular interpretation of words continued when I stood in the wings and watched Seth Sheldon recreate the bit during every single performance of I'll Say She Is. So there, now you have 2 reasons to hate me.
Hi, everyone. This is Jay Leon, longtime council member and even longer-time Marx Brothers fan. Thanks to Noah, Matthew, and Bob for the opportunity to speak about my observations of Horse Feathers, my favorite Marx Brothers movie. I'll quickly review why I love it, because I'm sure others have similar observations.
I love the music, and that it's only performed by the brothers. I especially love I'm Against It, in my view, the quintessential Marx Brothers song. I love how developed the characters are. The movie has not one, but two classic Groucho Chico exchanges, the password and the chauffeur scenes. There's some of Groucho's greatest jokes in this film. The classroom scene is priceless and possibly reminiscent of their vaudeville fun in high school acts. And Harpo's character is most depicted the way I think it should be, a magical, surreal imp, hilariously pulling hot cups of coffee, double-lit candles, swords, fishes, and axes out of his pockets. Other observations. I believe this is the first of their films that uses fast motion shots to enhance a joke or speed up the pacing. Here it happens when Harpo tackles the referee, but it's also done in Duck Soup, Groucho sliding down the fire pole, and Night at the Opera, Harpo descending the circular staircase to greet Chico. One might argue that the brothers are funny enough without needing artificial post-production gimmicks. I think these fast motion shots speed up the pace and make the films funnier. Besides the jump cuts and editing problems, I do have a number of minor criticisms. For me, Harpo's character is more enhanced with the costume from Animal Crackers than the rags he wears in Horse Feathers. The rags imply he's some sort of hobo or vagrant, which take away from his otherworldly persona. It may even possibly take away from the breakaway clothing joke when he's told to take that coat off by Mullen and McCarty. The same joke seems much funnier in Animal Crackers and Night at the Opera when he's wearing clothes that aren't supposed to break away. I'm also disappointed we didn't get to see the original ending, with the college burning down while the brothers are playing cards. My last point is rather controversial, but here it goes. I love all of Chico's piano solos, including this one. I love his chemistry with Thelma Todd while he's playing it. But I believe it's his weakest performance of all his movies. For one thing, unlike most of his other solos, the arrangement does not include any tempo changes, genre changes, classical introductions, or key changes. Although he's mostly limited to white keys and C major, there are other piano features where key changes occur. The Beer Barrel Polka, the piano duet in the Big Store, even his feature in A Day at the Races, which switches from minor to major and Beck. In short, this performance contains no musical contrast compared to his others. But also, Chico's performance is not up to his usual standards. His left hand, never his strongest suit, is practically non-existent, and the orchestra takes on the responsibility for providing the accompaniment. In the second chorus, he seems to be having trouble keeping up the tempo with the orchestra, and the solo lacks the facility with arpeggios and runs he usually displays in his other movies. I have a theory about this. The brothers love to say that Chico never practiced. He would have had to have practiced scales and arpeggios early in his training in order to play as well as he does. But throughout his career, even if he wasn't practicing, he was playing on stage every day, in vaudeville, on Broadway, the MGM tours. Even at the end of his career, he was touring with his orchestra and performing regularly, and one might contend some of his best playing on film is in Love Happy for that reason. But in the months before Horse Feathers was filmed, Chico was recovering from a car accident and likely did not have the opportunity to play the piano regularly for many weeks. I believe he was simply out of practice during Horse Feathers, and this shows in his collegiate solo. Many thanks once again to the council and to Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Zeppo.
Hi, Bob. Jesse Levy here with some thoughts on Horse Feathers. During Groucho's first song, I'm Against It, I've always wondered why the retiring college president sits down and cracks open a book during the song. And he must be a slow reader because he never turns a page. And by the way, where can I get a pitch pipe that only plays one note? I want to sing the one-note samba. In the speakeasy scene, the camera goes by Bobby Barber, who of course had a larger role in Monkey Business. And then we see Vince Barnett at the bar sitting next to Groucho, and Edgar Deering is the bartender. And then actually later on during the broadcasting of the football game is Phil Teague, who was in a lot of movies And he always reminded me of a young Walter Brennan. I used to get them confused a lot. Anyway, in Groucho's office, as he cracks walnuts, the two professors share a look between them. I guess they really are weasels. Okay, Connie's moving birthmark. This is not a mistake. It's part of a tradition, started, I think, in French theater, of adding a birthmark or a beauty spot to enhance, a woman's looks, as if Thelma Todd needed any enhancing. And did you notice while Zeppo is singing, he throws his arms out and then he puts his hands on his chest? You can see just how large his hands were. Maybe that's what made him such a good fighter. In the classroom scene, that poster of the lady who needs a nightgown is missing those small calendar pages at the bottom. They're there earlier, and then they're missing there, and then they reappear in the kidnapping scene. I never understood what Harp was looking for when he picks him up and puts him back down. In that scene also, I had the subtitles on, and they say that Groucho says von Sternmetz. I thought it was von Steinmetz also. It must be Groucho's New York accent, because if you listen closely, it does sound like he says von Sternmetz, but because he's got that accent, it comes out von Steinmetz. I think the book burning represents anti-intellectualism. Harper isn't amused by what he reads. He's laughing at it, at pseudo-intellectual tripe, which I think really must be a Perelman's swipe at pseudo-intellectual nonsense. In Connie Bailey's apartment, who has two front doors? David Landau goes out one, Zeppo comes in the other. I get the French farce roots, but it is weird. I love when Groucho says to her, "You've got to give my son up." Son up then was the name of the horse to bet on in Day at the Races. You mentioned that, which in the deep dive, which was a very deep dive, which lines did Perelman write? Just like you mentioned also in King and Chorus Girl, wondering which lines Groucho might have written. I always listen for which lines did Perelman write in Horse Feathers. It's a fun exercise to try to do while watching this movie. And David Landau's last appearance in the film is at the game, the football game, sitting there with Thelma. He doesn't react at all, not to Groucho's flirting with her or the game, which he bet big money on. So I don't know what the director was thinking, telling him to just sit there like a statue. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, fellas.
Hi, guys. Jim Genowine of New York City. At the start of Horse Feathers, Groucho does that great set piece where he sings and dances around the dais, or the desk, I guess it is, as all the gray-beard academics act as his dim-witted chorus. Near the start of the dance, Groucho does that amazing move with both legs, kind of corkscrewing them left and right, back and forth. He does the same move in Animal Crackers, I think. My question is, what is the name of that dance move, and where in vaudeville did he pick that up? It's world-class dance athleticism, in my opinion, and it's one of the many elements that prove Groucho to be an all-around comedy master. And I love the podcast. Keep up the great work, guys.
Our next clip is from Jimmy Angelina.
Yeah, so Horse Feathers, definitely one of my all-time favorite Marx Brothers movies, with a lot of my all-time favorite Marx Brothers moments. But for the purposes of keeping this brief, I'll single out probably my favorite moment in the movie and one of my all-time favorite Marx Brothers moments, and it's when Chico's playing the instrumental version of Collegiate on the piano before he does his version of Everyone Says I Love You, and Thelma Todd is sitting next to him, and it's this really sort of wonderful, spontaneous, unrehearsed seeming moment between the two of them, and it shows off Chico's charm. And my favorite moment within this moment is when he gets to the Mary Had a Little Lamb bit, And Thelma Todd sort of cranes over and looks him full in the face, and then he notices and glances at her and smiles. And it's just, it never fails to get me and delight me. And it just seems like a wonderful, joyous, in the moment, and serves, I think, to really amplify just what it was about Chico that charmed everybody, apparently, that met him and allowed him to get away with a lot. And just one of my all-time favorite bits, and two very charming people being very charming. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is John J. McKinney. The J stands for plenty. I'm a longtime caller, first-time listener, and I had some alleged thoughts and a couple questions about horse feathers. But first, my Marx Brothers origin story. I was a kid in 1970s Pittsburgh, and I was hugely fortunate in that I got to watch the Marx Brothers in an actual movie theater. There was a big old-fashioned movie theater in my neighborhood, and it owned prints of the last 10 Marx Brothers movies, and would show double features from time to time. My first double feature was At the Circus and the Big Store, and I was hooked for life. The next double feature was A Night at the Opera and A Day at the Races. By this time, I had figured out that the Marx Brothers consisted of Groucho, Chico, and Harpo. So you can imagine my shock when I attended the next double feature, Horse Feathers and Duck Soup, which starred the 4 Marx Brothers. Who was this 4th brother? I was dizzy with anticipation. Well, I got through all of Horse Feathers and most of Duck Soup before I finally realized during the Fredonia's Going to War number that this regular-looking fella who was singing and dancing with the brothers must be Zeppo. What a letdown. Nonetheless, I always recommended Horse Feathers as the gateway drug to anyone who was new to the Marx Brothers. And I stand by that, notwithstanding the very good arguments that were made for Monkey Business in the recent podcast. Now, I've just finished watching Horse Feathers on the Silver Screen Collection. I tried to listen to the commentary, but quit after about 15 minutes because the guy kept spouting facts that I knew that were wrong, thanks to hanging out with you lot all these years. Why did they hire that guy instead of one of you? On this viewing, though, I noticed a couple of things I had forgotten about. First, I always loved that all 4 brothers got the chance to perform Everyone Says I Love You to Thelma Todd. But I forgot that Harpo gets 2 cracks at the song, as he also whistles it to his horse, who he may have mistaken for Thelma. Also, I had forgotten the joke about Groucho having a chauffeur but no automobile, which Paul McCartney would use some 32 years later in the song Drive My Car. So I'd like to ask you, Bob, given your Beatles expertise, if Paul ever said whether he knew he was nicking the Marx Brothers when he used that joke. And I'd like to ask you, Matthew, if you could possibly care less. Finally, since I name-checked Bob and Matthew, it's only fair that I send regards to Noah Diamond and his alter ego, Jonah Spade, who famously didn't have the heart to join a club. Cut the cards.
Philip Kaplan from Brooklyn, New York, a longtime listener, first-time caller. First, my Marx Brothers history. I can't tell you the first Marx Brothers movie I saw because my dad took me to see them at a very early age. I think I even saw Animal Crackers at the Museum of Modern Art when I was like 6 or 5. It was the days in New York when you could see a Marx Brothers or W.C. Fields double feature at the Garrick or the Elgin movie theater. Dad also took me to see Buster Keaton movies and, 1 or 2 Harold Lloyd. I definitely remember seeing The Freshman at MoMA. Laurel and Hardy I had to watch on TV. I don't know why. I don't think Dad liked them as much. My dad also collected pre-war blues 78s, but that's another story. So as to Horse Feathers, I don't have anything really unique to say about Horse Feathers, but I did memorize Groucho's opening monologue. And it's not as easy for an 11-year-old to do a Groucho Marx monologue as you would think. I mean, as I would think. Just saying the lines just doesn't work. There's skill involved, as opposed to Monty Python. You could do Monty Python bits and still get laughs, right? They were laughing with me, not at me, right?
And now let's hear from Paula Spiden? Well, just give me a break here, Paula. I'm doing my best.
In my world of Bloody Marys, petting dogs, and corn, so much corn, I lead a very nondescript existence. My ability to land a joke truly requires the assistance of Captain Sully to make that landing smooth. Ugh, that was really cheesy. Even I can't stand it. But my point is proven. I'm just not funny. But I digress. There are those that are not me. Those rare folks that seduce and ensnare us with joviality. As Harpo so aptly points out, a humble sword and a fish make the promise to us that it will lead to hilarity and tomfoolery. Okay, yes, I realize that Harpo comes after the initial door interaction, so his promise would be nothing as we've already seen it, but just go with me here, would ya? Now, one wonders how a mind works, and in what direction does it churn to take something so mundane, so banal, and have the result become an eye-tearing, side-stitching belly laugh. Just as an aside, it has been said that when the internet started its popularity boom and people needed to password all their accounts, that the most utilized password was, you guessed it, swordfish. Our boys should be proud. I am, however, guessing that many people soon became sad, as hackers are bound to be Marx Brothers fans too. I adore everything about this scene. As is so often with them, the flow is just perfect. From Chico's cantankerous start with his boss to Harpo's entrance, there is no wasted time. I do, though, have a question about the door. Were peepholes truly that large in the 30s? I'm too lazy to look it up, so I thought maybe you all might have an answer for me. It was once asked on here, if you could have any one souvenir from any Marx Brothers set, what would you take? There is no hesitation in my answer. It would be the door from Horse Feathers. I think often with props, it can be easy for the prop to take over. But in this instance, it was simply an enhancement that really did its job well. Horse Feathers is not my favorite Marx Brothers movie, but this may be my all-time favorite Marx Brothers scene. Thank you all for listening. It's always been very important to me to get my views on entertainment out to people I don't know. Cheers to all.
And finally, let's hear from Peter Freeman, who contributed the music heard in the original episode. He had some comments to go along with his tunes. So why don't we listen to what he had to say?
As I told you in Monkey Business, I became a trombone player, so here we go. Of the 3 Paramount films that were shot in Hollywood, I think Horse Feathers is most like a play. The first 2 scenes have beautiful opening and closures. The first scene, we open up with Groucho basically saying a few words and then singing Whatever It Is, I'm Against It. And then at the end of that scene, after he speaks with Zeppo, he says, Whatever it is, I'm against it. Then we go to the speakeasy, and we open up with the whole idea of swordfish. And after all the shenanigans that go on, we finish with swordfish. Swordfish. If this were a play, those would be perfect scenes in the first act. We seem to lose that ideal as the movie goes on, but it really doesn't matter at that point. It's just wonderful to see how structured the beginning of this film is. I truly think that Thelma Todd is underrated as an actress. I take a look at this movie and I see the range that she utilizes. And I think that had she had a longer life and a longer career, we could have seen her doing not only comedy, but possibly some dramas. She really was a pretty amazing actress. The more I watch Horse Feathers and enjoy it, the more I wonder how much the film influenced movies and comedians of the time. If you take a look at the whole bar scene right after Swordfish, and you see Groucho and Chico talking with the bartender and figuring out how to pay, that's straight Abbott and Costello with a word changed here and there. When you look at the last scene of Groucho, Chico, and Harpo getting married to Thelma Todd, if that isn't the Three Stooges, I don't know what is. All I know is Horse Feathers is an incredibly funny movie and obviously a huge influence on other movies of that time and probably still today.
So that does it for this bonus episode of the Marx Brothers Council podcast. Join us in a couple weeks for another non-bonus type episode. And if you want to contribute to a future re-dive to a Marx film, just go ahead and send it to us at marxbrotherscouncilpodcast@gmail.com. We're going to be doing Duck Soup in a couple months, and down the line, we do one basically every 3 months. So try and keep it 3 to 5 minutes or, just somewhere in there, and give us your best shot. Tell us what you thought of the film. Give us some good stuff that we could use in the episode. And if we can't use it in the episode, we'll use it in another bonus segment. So hopefully you'll hear yourself somewhere. You will, unless you're really obscene or Jay Hopkins.